Right now, your mind is the only place where you are truly alone. It is your ultimate private space, a vault where embarrassing thoughts and irrational daydreams can exist without anyone ever finding out. We usually feel more exposed than we actually are. This is the illusion of transparency, a bias making us believe our internal anxiety is screamingly obvious. In reality, we project a minimal signal. Strangers are remarkably poor at detecting what's happening in our heads. Our internal storms remain safely isolated, undetectable to everyone. But imagine if that biological barrier suddenly vanishes. Every internal monologue becomes a globally audible reality, turning our private thoughts into a public broadcast. Social psychologist Erwin Altman developed privacy regulation theory to explain why this would be a disaster. He described privacy as a dynamic boundary, the selective control of how much of ourselves we allow others to access. When that boundary drops to zero, the streets flood with unfiltered reactions. Every passing judgment and aggressive impulse becomes a direct sensory assault, likely triggering immediate interpersonal combat as we lose the ability to filter our most basic reactions. This total exposure of our internal lives creates an immediate biological and social crisis. Without the ability to regulate our boundaries, the noise of our collective minds becomes a threat to our very survival. The macro chaos of the streets would eventually follow us into our most intimate spaces. Homes, friendships, and marriages would suddenly be filled with a new, suffocating tension. Humans rely on small, calculated lies to keep social structures intact. We use deception as a tool to prevent unnecessary harm to the people we love. These pro-social lies maintain our harmony. We fake a smile at a bad gift, or hide a momentary irrational annoyance at a spouse. They are the load-bearing deceptions that allow relationships to function. When telepathy shatters these boundaries, we experience boundary turbulence. This is the severe psychological damage caused when private information is breached involuntarily, forcing two people to absorb raw data they were never meant to see. Trust relies on a filter. If you can't hide a momentary flash of frustration or a deep-seated insecurity, the foundational bond between partners permanently breaks. Interpersonal love and friendship cannot survive without that protective barrier. Once the ability to choose what we share is gone, the relationship collapses under the weight of total transparency. On a larger scale, diplomacy and high-stakes business would end. These systems require strategic concealment. If a negotiator can hear your absolute bottom line or your true intent, the entire process of compromise breaks down. This creates a mental panopticon. When people know their minds are being monitored, they begin to aggressively and exhaustively censor their own thoughts to avoid judgment. Daily life becomes a paranoid game of mental chess. You might try to think only in abstract symbols or white noise, desperately attempting to hide your true intentions from anyone within earshot. This takes a massive physical toll. The human brain lacks the biological bandwidth to process the continuous, overlapping neural data of a surrounding population. For neurodivergent individuals, whose minds are often already sensitive to overstimulation, this flood of external data would be a breaking point, a constant, inescapable bombardment of sensory input. This level of forced mental intrusion results in excessive, unavoidable distress. Because we cannot shut off our brains to prevent these intrusions, the experience is legally and psychologically indistinguishable from torture. In this macro-scale panopticon, absolute transparency doesn't free us, it paralyzes us, creating a society tortured by its own inescapable noise. There is a utopian counterargument, the belief that total transparency would end deception, stop all wars, and force us into a state of total empathy. But this ignores the reality of the inner monologue. Our thoughts are largely irrational, temporary, and emotionally volatile. They are not our final conclusions. There is a critical difference between thought and action. A chaotic waveform passes through a psychological filter, emerging as a smooth, calculated action. In a telepathic world, we lose this protection. We are judged on our chaotic rough drafts and punished for unacted upon impulses. Judging humans by the raw data of their minds is a recipe for endless conflict. World peace cannot exist if we are constantly reacting to the erratic flashes of anger or judgment that people never intended to voice. Privacy and secrets are not human flaws. They are the vital psychological infrastructure that allows us to safely